Jeremy Strong plays a hopeful heir to a media empire on HBO's Succession, and he's hoping to break into the awards race for it. I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby here with Jeremy to ask him, do you think Kendall Roy truly has what it takes to lead the family business?
It's a great question. I mean, I think last season we saw someone who is desperately trying to prove himself and to prove his mettle and to prove to his father that he does have what it takes. I think a lot of the conflict stems from the fact that Kendall is a very different man than his father is. You know, Logan is this sort of almost primitive businessman. There's something like reptilian about him and brutal. And I think that whatever power that Logan possesses innately, he didn't pass on to his children. He passed on the trappings of power and the circumstances of power, but somehow didn't instill in them a personal power. So I think Kendall is trying to be the kind of dominating force that his father is, but he's a more sensitive and I would say ambivalent in himself, conflicted person. And I also think his father acts on him almost like kryptonite. I think it scrambles his signal. And so whatever capacities that Kendall has under the scrutiny and the sort of withering gaze of his father, he sort of loses his power. But yes, I do think he has that fire in him. And I think, in this first season, certainly, Kendall, I'm pushed beyond limits of what a person should be pushed to endure, and by my father. And I think Logan is trying to make this a proving ground, to see what happens when I'm up against this much adversity and up against this much struggle. And as we saw, I think I collapse under the weight and the pressures of all of this. It's only now in the second season that I'm free from that dynamic and from the need to prove myself, that I'm discovering a greater power in myself. But I think sometimes it's like if Vito Corleone had rejected and shamed Michael instead of nurturing and encouraging him, what would that look like? And that's sort of the ground that we're on.
And what was it about Kendall Roy that attracted you to this character and resonated with you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I see this as like an archetypal story of ambition, which is a very modern story in our culture. And it's something that I identify with, the striving and the need to prove oneself, and the way in which that need can take you away from your core, and can lead you to in a sense violate your own nature and cross your own maybe ethical and moral lines in order to achieve the said objective. So any character, to me, who feels like an outsider with a fire in their belly is something that I personally connect with and relate to. And on top of that, I think, I have a lot of empathy for the children in this family. In a sense, the wounds that they carry and the weight that they carry. It's people have talked about this show as it relates to King Lear and Shakespeare, and sort of Shakespeare and the media industrial complex. And I think there's a little bit of Five Easy Pieces and Dostoevsky in there too. So to have a protagonist this rich, with this amount of pain and the size of his need to prove himself and get his father's acceptance and validation and love, it's a very powerful engine for an actor.
So we mentioned before we started this talk that you were in the movie The Big Short, directed and co-written by Adam McKay,
Right.
who is an executive producer of this series and directed several episodes. Was getting to work with Adam again one of the reasons that you were drawn to the project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had lunch with Adam in LA, and he told me about, he said, I have this sort of Murdoch-esque script that I'm looking at, and I'd love you to read it. And, I've always been fascinated by that dramatic terrain. I think the Murdochs are a dramatically, incredibly fascinating, sort of dynastic family to look at. And I'm sure you saw that piece in the Times a few weekends ago about Murdoch, and and it was amazing sort of seeing all of that unfold between 21st Century Fox and Sky and Comcast and Disney, and the children sort of divvying up the kingdom. All of that felt very now and very much part of the zeitgeist. So going back, I think when Adam told me about this, I was immediately, pulled into it. And then I looked at a book by James Stewart called Disney War, which is this incredible book about Ovitz and Katzenberg and Michael Eisner at Disney, and the sort of Machiavellian War of the Roses, but also incredibly human. These individuals who are vying for power and ascendancy to fill some lack in themselves, as far as I can tell, and this idea of power filling the vacuum in people, and I know that Adam was throughout The Big Short talking a lot about a documentary called The Corporation, in which they look at a corporation and they sort of enumerate the different diagnoses of a psychopath from the DSM-4 or whatever, and the argument is that the modern corporation has all of those characteristics. And Adam was sort of searching for some story that could embody the way in which that is at the center of modern life, and a character that could be at the center of that, and in a sense how the kind of trauma and poison of that well then can sort of poison the world. And so, and listen, Adam's so brilliant and a visionary, and has such a sort of vast, encompassing understanding of the ailments and issues in our culture. And I think he really felt like this had its, this really went for the jugular. So yeah, I mean, fuck yeah, I was very sorry, I probably can't swear live or
You're fine.
But no, I mean, I and then I read it and was completely compelled by it. And I think what you want to read as an actor is something that you feel, in a sense, that you don't know if you could do this, that you don't know if you have it in you to do this. And when I felt that, I thought that aligned me well with Kendall, because that's the situation that he's in. He has been, heavy as the head that wears the crown. He's been put into this position of assuming this role of leadership, and I think he doubts and questions in a pretty agonizing way whether he's up to the task. And so I tried to just let that live in me, sort of trying to carry the mantle of an HBO show, which obviously weighs heavily on me and is tremendously important to me to serve that in the same way that I think Kendall felt like he was up against the test of his life.
You actually brought up part of my next question. That the show obviously takes a bit of its story from the Murdoch family. Did you find yourself having any previously unrealized sympathy towards families like the Murdochs or
Yeah.
people that are in similar positions to them?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, there's some wonderful books written about the Murdochs and about the a lot of these families, the Redstones and the Sulzbergers and the Bancrofts but the Murdochs in particular, there was something in Michael Wolff's book, The Man Who Owns the News, and I think I've spoken about this before, but it really resonated with me. This idea that the only language that their father spoke and understood was the language of strength, and also the language of commerce and news. I mean, when they were kids at the breakfast table, the family sort of intimacy was around the family business, and so the way in which you had to the only currency you had in that family was being able to speak that language of strength and fluency in business and mastery and dominance. And so I wondered what it would be like to, if strength were not your native language, and of course, seeing, and I can't speak in depth about it because I don't know them personally, but I felt quite devastated when I read about what happened recently, in the sense that these children who had been groomed their whole lives and preparing their whole lives to carry the mantle of the empire, and now no longer. Now I can't see you anymore. I don't. Am I still connected to you?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I think McKay also loves a documentary called Born Rich, which I looked at, and it explores and examines the sort of inner lives of a bunch of these children of dynastic families, and the way in which the weight and expectations and the legacy of that kind of stunted their growth and was difficult for them, hard on them, and so yeah, I feel a ton of empathy for that situation, and I think the show is about family, and in a sense about legacy. Is like how do you deal with legacy? How do you deal with in our case our father's legacy, and emerge from under the shadow of that? And can you ever escape from the family? And I think we see Kendall sort of double bound. He both tries to assert himself against his father, but in a sense, everything he does revolves around the kind of pole star of Logan, and that question is still unresolved. The question of can any of us escape the legacy of this family?
One of the other interesting things about the show is that it draws on both dramatic but also comedic aspects, sometimes even of the absurd. And I was wondering whether you found yourself more drawn to the dramatic aspects of the show or the comedic aspects, or both equally.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm drawn towards the dramatic aspects as the ballast and the sort of I saw that Brian did a talk with you, and he talked about this show as a morality tale, as a Chaucerian morality tale, and I feel the same way. And so I think it's very important to bring that gravity and weight and sort of life and death stakes to it, and the humor, which Jesse and these team of writers, they're really funny, and there's some brilliant sort of caustic humor in it. But I think I guess that works for me through character. I think it's one way that my character, and certainly my brother Roman's character, is sort of defended, and we use humor and irony as a weapon and part of our shield, because these kids are very armored. There's not a lot of vulnerability in this family. I think vulnerability would be seen as weakness, and our father has brought us up with the credo of winning. Sumner Redstone's book is called A Passion to Win. It's like that's what this family is all about. And then I lose again and again, and am thwarted, and I'm brought to this reckoning at the end. But no, the humor is a great part of the show, and I think you need it. I mean, it's Chekhovian in a sense. There's room for the pathos, and there's room for the levity. And when I feel that it's truthful within the circumstances, I love playing with that aspect of the character. Um, but 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 to me, it's a drama, and it's quite a serious one. I think as an actor, you have to take it as seriously as your own life.
So, also, we are an awards website, obviously. If you were to get nominated at this year's Emmys, you would have to submit an episode to the voters. Which episode would you want to submit to the Emmy voters?
I haven't watched the show, so, but I know from the experience of going through it, um, the final two episodes, and for me, the final episode was certainly it was the biggest challenge I've ever had as an actor. Some of those scenes, on an emotional level, I felt that the whole season needed to build towards that armor very suddenly cracking, and for us to see the sort of primal core of this inner child, in a sense. And so, and I didn't know, if I'd be capable of doing that. I didn't know what would happen in these scenes. I don't really prepare. Well, I prepare a great deal, but I don't prescribe anything or plan anything. And so, in a sense, you just step into the water when they say action, and then let the scene unfold as it will. And I think the noose had been tightening for so long, and the pressures had been mounting, and the sort of, you know the fault lines of the tectonic plates of the show really all just put this character into a crucible at the end of crisis and extremity. And so that was a really difficult episode where, I sort of went as far as I feel like I've ever gone as an actor. And honestly, I got to the end of that episode at the end of the season and felt like I had nothing left to give, that I had given everything. And I didn't quite know, even as an actor, where I would go from there, which is not a feeling I've ever had before. It was a feeling, honestly, of some fundamental tension resolving itself in that scene, in that final scene. The tension of all of the drive and need and ambition of this character's life coming crashing down. So I know that I had a very personal and real experience throughout the season, but in those episodes, in particular, and it was quite cathartic, and I tried to just be honest and give it all. And you know, they put me through a lot. It was when I read that final script, we had a table read at Eastnor Castle, and I just thought, you know, I want to get back on a plane to New York. I don't, you know, it's both incredible writing that you want to go through as an actor, but it was also incredibly terrifying to me. To go through what I felt I needed to go through in order to really serve the material.
Well, thanks, Jeremy, for talking with us. To all of your viewers, go to goldderby.com right now and make your predictions so you can compete against our experts, editors, and other fans and prove if you are the smartest prognosticator in Hollywood. But before you go, click our subscribe button on this video so you're alerted to our great chats with top contenders. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Thanks, man. Take care.